It was a humid afternoon in the heart of a bustling city, the kind of heat that made the air feel heavy, oppressive. People moved along the sidewalks, some rushing to avoid the sun, others strolling casually, soaking in the last days of summer. Among them walked Tyrone Mitchell, a tall, broad-shouldered black man, dressed in a simple t-shirt and worn jeans. His expression was serious, lost in thought, as he carried a small brown bag containing a gift for his niece's birthday. Today was a special day, but Tyrone was far from feeling celebratory. As he crossed the street near a busy corner, he suddenly heard the blaring sirens of a police cruiser behind him. The car screeched to a halt just as Tyrone stepped onto the sidewalk. "Hey! You," a harsh voice shouted, carrying over the noise of the traffic. Tyrone turned to see a white police officer, Officer Daniel Harrington, stepping out of the squad car. His face was twisted into a scowl, his hand resting casually on the holster of his gun. Harrington had been patrolling this neighborhood for years, and he carried a reputation of being rough, arrogant, and, as many whispered, racist. The eyes of onlookers darted toward them, attention immediately settling in the air. Tyrone sighed inwardly. He had hoped to avoid any kind of trouble today, but it seemed fate had different plans. "Can I help you, officer?" Tyrone asked calmly, keeping his tone measured. "Yeah, you can help me," Harrington sneered, stepping closer. "I saw you jaywalking back there. You think the rules don't apply to you?" Tyrone blinked, confused. "I used the crosswalk. There was no jaywalking. Are you calling me a liar?" Harrington's voice rose. He squared his shoulders, towering over Tyrone. The street suddenly felt quieter, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Tyrone opened his mouth to protest but thought better of it. He had learned long ago that arguing with a cop like Harrington only made things worse. He took a deep breath and said, "I apologize if it looked that way, officer. I didn't mean any disrespect," but Harrington wasn't interested in apologies. He was interested in making an example out of Tyrone. A small, twisted part of him enjoyed the power he held in moments like these, where he could reduce someone to nothing with just a few sharp words or an unjustified arrest, hands on the wall. "Now," Harrington barked, Tyrone's heart sank. "Seriously? For what?" "For resisting an officer's command," Harrington growled, his voice dripping with condescension. "What, you got something to hide?" Tyrone knew better than to resist. With a resigned look, he placed his hands against the brick wall of a nearby building, feeling the rough surface beneath his palms. Behind him, Harrington's voice was loud and humiliating. "What's in the bag, huh? Drugs? Weapons?" Tyrone clenched his teeth, fighting back the anger rising within him. He had nothing to hide. His record was clean, and the only thing in the bag was a doll for his niece, but he knew explaining that wouldn't matter to Harrington. The crowd of onlookers had grown, their whispers swirling in the tense atmosphere. Some pulled out their phones to record the scene, while others simply watched in silent discomfort. Tyrone felt the weight of their eyes on him, the sting of humiliation crawling under his skin. As Harrington patted him down, he found nothing, but that didn't stop him from making a show of it, pulling the brown bag from Tyrone's hand and dumping its contents onto the sidewalk. The doll tumbled out, landing pathetically at Tyrone's feet. Harrington looked down, momentarily caught off guard by the sight of the toy. "What the hell is this?" he muttered, but before he could say anything more, his radio crackled to life. "Officer Harrington, report to Parkside Elementary immediately. There's a situation involving a child. Urgent." Harrington's brow furrowed as he glanced at his radio. Tyrone didn't move, still standing with his hands against the wall, his expression stoic, but there was something in his eyes now, a flicker of knowing. "Stay right there," Harrington ordered, though his voice had lost some of its earlier venom. He snatched up the doll and shoved it back into the bag before heading toward his car. Tyrone remained silent, his mind racing. He knew that school. It was where Harrington's young daughter, Emily, attended. As Harrington sped off, sirens blaring once more, Tyrone stood still for a long moment, the tension draining from his body. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He hesitated for only a second before making a decision. He needed to go to that school. When Harrington arrived at Parkside Elementary, the scene was chaotic. Teachers and parents were gathered in a panic, while officers were trying to keep order. His heart pounded as he spotted his wife, Rachel, standing near the entrance, her face pale with fear. "Daniel," she cried, running toward him. "It's Emily." Harrington didn't need to hear the rest. His gut twisted as he sprinted into the building, his mind flashing with images of his little girl, her blonde hair and bright blue eyes. Always so full of life. "Where is she?" Harrington shouted, barging past the teachers. In the science lab, someone responded, but the details were lost in the flood of noise. He burst into the lab, and there she was, Emily, standing on a chair, her eyes wide with terror as she tried to stay completely still. His heart nearly stopped when he saw why. Just inches from her, coiled tightly on the floor, was a large, venomous snake, its head raised, its tongue flicking out dangerously. Harrington froze. He was a cop, trained for high-stress situations, but this was different. This was his little girl. If he moved too quickly or made a mistake, it could cost Emily her life. Just then, another figure stepped into the room behind him. Harrington turned to see Tyrone Mitchell. He hadn't expected to see the man here, not after the humiliation he had put him through earlier. But Tyrone's expression was calm, and there was a determined glint in his eyes. "I can help," Tyrone said quietly. Harrington blinked, too stunned to respond. "I've handled snakes before," Tyrone continued, his voice steady. "I used to volunteer at a wildlife center." "You have to stay calm and move slowly. Let me handle this." Harrington's mind was racing, torn between his pride and the fear for his daughter's life. He had been moments away from arresting this man, treating him like a criminal, but now he was standing here, offering to save his little girl. Tyrone didn't wait for Harrington's approval. He took a slow, careful step toward the snake, his movements fluid and controlled. The room seemed to hold its breath as he inched closer, his eyes locked on the serpent. With the precision of someone who had done this before, he reached out, slowly lowering the chair that Emily was standing on. Then, with a quick, decisive motion, he grabbed the snake by the tail and expertly tossed it into a nearby container. The room erupted in relieved gasps as Emily ran to her father, tears streaming down her face. Harrington knelt down, pulling her into a tight embrace, his heart still hammering in his chest. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice hoarse, as Tyrone turned to leave. But Tyrone simply nodded, his expression unreadable, and walked out of the building. Later that evening, Harrington sat in his patrol car, the weight of the day pressing down on him. He had spent years seeing the world through a narrow lens, judging people by their appearance, making assumptions about who they were. But today, Tyrone had shattered those illusions. He reached for his phone and typed in Tyrone's name, finding his address in the police database. Without hesitating, Harrington drove to Tyrone's home. When Tyrone opened the door, He looked surprised but not angry. "I came to apologize," Harrington said, his voice heavy with regret. "I treated you like you were less than a man. And today you saved my little girl. I was wrong. I'm sorry." Tyrone studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. "I didn't do it for you," he said quietly. "I did it because no child deserves to suffer, no matter who their parents are." Harrington swallowed hard, realizing the full weight of what Tyrone had said. He had been humbled in a way he never thought possible. And though it wouldn't erase the past, it was a start. As Harrington turned to leave, he looked back at Tyrone one last time. "Thank you," he said again, and this time, there was a sincerity in his voice that couldn't be denied, and from that day forward, the city knew a different Harrington, one who no longer saw people in shades of black and white, but in the full, complex spectrum of their humanity.